judge his name was Steve Roth. He was a fine jurist, and later went on to the Supreme Court. He was a fine man. When he passed that sentence, I think the cruelest sentence that could have been given me would have been had Steve Roth just said, "Go live with yourself." Would have been far tougher. Excuse me. But he passed that sentence, and I guess what is a very normal human reaction. I had an instinctive reaction of fear, but simultaneously the most real sense of relief I'd ever known, because I knew it was over. It was over. And I'm not talking about a new day and there's hope at the end of the tunnel. None of that. I mean, it's done. It is flat done. The next day, I walked into that institution on a chain with 5 other guys, and knew when I went in there it was a one-way trip. Normally they didn't send guys for my kind of crime. That kind of crime is referred to as a casual offense. Not that it's minor, but it's casual in that it's not an intentional act. It's something that grows out of something like alcoholism or what have you. And normally folks with that kind of crime in maximum custody. But they made an exception for me. I think they looked at my history and said, "Don't give this guy daylight." I think they were wrong, but it doesn't matter because of his history. And so they put me in there. I never believed I'd ever come out alive. I was an absolute blob of a human. I mean, you talk about the living dead, that's about what I was. I was like a guy in a catatonic state almost. And I was just flat done. And didn't have particular fear or anxiety or anything like that. I was just resigned to the fate. And totally isolated. They put me in a cell, didn't know who was in the cell on either side of me. It wasn't I didn't care, it was antisocial. They just didn't exist. In retrospect, it's amazingly simple. But they put me in there. One day a guy called me out for an interview, an intake interview, filling out social history stuff and things like that. And when he got through, he made the same kind of conclusion that everybody who'd ever captured me made. It was always, you're an alcoholic, a drunk, a problem drinker. He said a little different. He said, "Man, you've had a trouble with booze." And I said, "Yeah. I mean, my God, that's obvious. I had a record that thick. You know, the court, everything in there is drunk and nothing else. I've never committed any crime sober. And nor been locked up sober." And so he exclaimed, and I said, "Yeah, that's obvious." And then he said, "We have an AA group here, and I think you ought to go." Now, he might as well have said, "We have a camel here, and I think you ought to ride it." I had no clue what he was talking about. Didn't give any thought to it. Now, certainly this was a long time ago. And I'm sure we had public information, but it hadn't sort of penetrated. I hung out. I never heard of it. I had no clue. I never heard anybody helping a drunk. You know, we had detox, but it consisted of, excuse the phrase, Bob, but it consisted of, when you bucked up a little bit on the street, the policeman would go upside your head with a blackjack, put you in jail. I guarantee you that was detox. Very effective, very effective, short term. You think you can't get sober? Smack a cop. I didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. And so this guy made his comments, and I don't think there was any conversation. I don't think he knew anymore. But what I do know now is that somebody, either in PI or CPC, told this guy, when you get a guy and he's got a record like that, tell him he ought to go to AA. That's exactly what he did. Amazing. You know, they don't teach that in social work school, or MSW, or psychology, or medicine, for that matter. My son's a physician. You know, he learned more in going to AA meetings with me than he did medical school about alcoholism by far. It costs less too. But you know, I didn't know anything. And so he told me, and then a few days later, I got a little note in my cell that said you could go to your first AA meeting February 2nd of '57. I didn't even have a clue what he was. I think somebody told me it stood for Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought, God, that's a yucky name for something. I mean, secret drunks. Now, who wants to be one of them? be some kind of a razzle-dazzle hallelujah, some kind of a razzle-dazzle hallelujah chorus and keep dunking and stuff. What else could it be? That's all I'd ever seen. You know, would be in county jail and some bunch of clean old folks come there, tell you some stuff, read something, sing Amazing Grace, and I'd blubber every time, get converted to whatever they were selling. And it lasted about till they got gone. So that's what I figured about. And I got that little thing, and I didn't know, certainly this is all hindsight, but I had no idea what a wonderful position I was sitting in terms of recovery. Because the sad fact of the business is that, well, it's not sad in the long run, but it's sad in coming to that sort of crux of the dilemma. I believe that the most beautiful word in the language of recovery is surrender. Mm-hmm. Surrender. Get sober because of attainment or achievement or learning new language or memorizing a book like my buddy said this afternoon. You know, that's not how we get sober. You know, we get sober just because somebody helped us get in the right direction at the right time. And I was fortunate in that I was so beaten, that I had no fight. I had absolutely no fight. And when the time came for that meeting and they announced it, I wandered over there. I didn't want to join Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever it was. You know, people who are extremely isolated, the last thing they want to do is go yuck it up with somebody. I mean, that's the last thing on the list. And what I want to do is sit at that cell and stare at my navel and do anything I can do to keep from thinking. Is what I wanted to do. But I wandered over there, walked into my first meeting, had no idea what to expect, and it's just as well, because my worst expectations came true in a way. I walked in and one guy spoke to me, had my name on my shirt. You better be glad I can't reach you, I'd kiss you. Thank you very much. I was saving that last drop. You saved my life. Oh, great. And so when I walked in there, I was about as lost as a guy could be. I had no earthly idea. And this guy, that officer, read my name on the shirt. I, Mr. Yes, sir, sit down. Sat down, listened to my first AA meeting. And I've heard a lot of people talk about their first meeting, that when they walked in, they felt the warmth and all this kind of stuff, and smiling faces and all this stuff. I felt like home at last. I guarantee you I didn't feel that way. I felt like I was on the wrong planet. I've never felt more out of place anywhere in my life than I did in Alcoholics Anonymous. Most of the guys in there had drunk more years than I was years old. And I felt like a wimp. I wasn't by any, but you look at me running a wimp, but compared to who I was with, man, I looked like a lightweight. Didn't believe I was alcoholic. Truly did not. I believed that I was a world beater getting ready to happen if I could ever learn to keep my feet. I knew I'd make it. Believed that. Going right down the thing. I had a guy tell me one time I had a lot of potential. I had 1,000 tell me I was the most worthless scumbag they'd ever seen. I remember the one told me I had potential. And so when I walked in, that felt totally out of place. Totally out of place. I am deeply, deeply grateful that what I walked into was a real, live, three-legacy group of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am deeply grateful. Anybody that might be relatively new to the program, three legacies are simply, they're the principles we stand on. You know, fundamental is recovery. That's where we spend 99% of our time talking about recovery. Very important legacy. But there's another one called unity, where we learn to live with each other and with the world around us so that we leave the prison isolation called alcoholism. And then there's another one called service. You know, that's where I think we treat a self-centered condition by focusing on being of service to others. And so I was in a group that even in a maximum custody penitentiary, it was one of the best AA groups I've ever been to. It was as good as the one I belong to now, and I belong to a good group. That's a three legacy group. But this was a group that understood about how to greet new people coming into a program, how to get them influenced in the right direction. It was a good, solid group, and I'll always be grateful. That'll always be my home group. I just don't want to be a regular member. go up there every once in a while in the area just to make sure I'm not there. And maybe say a little something to whoever it is. But that'll always be important. That'll always be my home group. But it's where it happened for me. And I'm exactly who I said I was. Just kind of a lost young guy sitting there feeling hopelessly out of place. And our group consisted of one week and speaker the next. And speaker depended on us finding him. Nobody came in on a commitment and they did like we used to do so often now, like I do when I sponsor now. But I was secretary. And I had to start finding AA members to speak, and I didn't even know who any of them were. But I guarantee you I learned how to find them and found them. I recall that we ever had a single meeting that somebody didn't come in. Somebody didn't respond. There was a guy, I wrote a letter one time to a guy that, his name was Johnny Snow. He was a Navy fellow. And I didn't know it. I didn't know Johnny Snow, but somebody told me about him, and I wrote him a letter. I didn't realize that Johnny Snow couldn't read or write. So he got the letter. I'm sure he got somebody to tell him what it said. And said, will you come to Jackson? And whoever wrote it for him said, yeah, I'll come. And didn't realize it till afterward, but Jackson was only 60 miles from where he lived. And he left at 2 o'clock in the morning for a 1 o'clock in the afternoon meeting because he had no transportation. None. Excuse me. He was going to hitchhike, but it's hard to get around 2 o'clock in the morning. He was back in peaceful days. That was hard to do. He wanted to be sure he was there. And he was there. Johnny didn't make the speech of the century. Excuse me. What he did was give what he had. And his crude, very poor English. What a message. What a message. Never heard of a more powerful message that somebody giving everything he's got. So anyway, that was just a part of it. There was one little thing in the group that I'll run the clock up or what? Well, let me just say it. I'm going to get you out of that, but I do want to finish up around some other stuff too. I was very, very fortunate to be in a good, solid group. We were a group that was serious about steps. Now, there's some notion that back in those good old days we used to do a wonderful job of taking through the steps. If we did, I never saw it. They hid it from me. And then what I got was, you get your best old buddy, do the best you can. I had a good buddy in the group that was helpful to me. I didn't call him a sponsor, but he was very helpful to me in just chatting about stuff. But we weren't all that slick and well organized then. It was just sort of get at it. And what I found is that if you do take the actions that are laid out in the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, as honestly as you know how to do it, when you get through, you'll be a different person. And I don't care what your motives are. You'll be a different person. Because when you get through, those principles and motives will match up. And you'll be a different cat. And I found it to be absolutely true. I got introduced to the program in a good, solid way by other members of the group. And I fumbled my way through the steps. That's the best way you could say it. But if you do it as honestly as you know how to do it, when you get through, it will truly be, and was for me, a transforming experience. Transforming. The program worked as well for me at a maximum custody penitentiary as it ever has anywhere. I was